Welcome to The Cutting Edge. I'm Zima Creason, Executive Director of the California Edge Coalition. The Cutting Edge is our interview series where we connect with leaders to discuss a range of topics related to workforce development, education, and training. Today, I'm excited to welcome Marianne Bates, Executive Director of the Office of Cradle-to-Career Data. Welcome, Marianne.
Thanks so much, Seema. It's great to be here.
So let's just dive in. You're brand new to this position. Congratulations. Can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Sure. Yes, as you mentioned, I just started this role in February, so I'm 2.5 months in. And prior to this, I worked on evidence-based policy and data-related efforts at the federal level. And prior to that was at MIT's Poverty Action Lab, where we partnered with practitioners and state and local governments on linking large data sets and answering questions about what worked and really bring a passion for using data and evidence-based approaches to advance opportunity, advance equity, and really aim to remove barriers and obstacles in the whole cradle-to-career landscape. My career started with a focus on education and international development originally. Both of those interests started from my background in Ohio's Amish community. So, growing up navigating two very different cultures and speaking different languages and, very different approaches to education, I think that background really sparked a passion for working to advance opportunity and to break down barriers that people face in pursuing an education and pursuing their career plans. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. I'm now here in the Sacramento area. I've got 3 kids, 2 of them are old enough to be in the local public schools. So I also have a personal connection to the kinds of issues that we're looking at in the cradle-to-career landscape.
Love that. You come with such a unique lens, and we're so lucky to have you. So great. Can you talk a little bit about the goals and the purpose of the C2C?
Sure. So the cradle-to-career data system, the whole purpose of it is to really connect individuals and organizations with trusted information and resources. So we're trying to design a system that can really share insights on critical milestones in this whole pipeline, right? From cradle to career, from early care and early learning to K-12, higher education, skills training, employment. So it's really about collecting information across that entire landscape. And so our goal and the vision of Cradle to Career is to empower individuals to reach that full potential and to foster evidence-based decision-making to help California build a more equitable future. So that's kind of the big picture goals of Cradle to Career. I feel incredibly fortunate to be joining these efforts after the very robust, almost 2-year-long planning process that went into this. It was a very collaborative planning process, and a lot of the, the recommendations that came from those many conversations and meetings have really laid out a great roadmap for the work that we can do and how we can bring data together to help people understand what's happening in the cradle-to-career landscape and really see this as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to build a new data system for the state of California.
Absolutely. It's very, very exciting. And, Edge was very deeply involved in the planning process years before you came on board. And it, just like you said, it was very, very collaborative. A lot of the recommendations that came from community, came from advocates, from the boots on the ground really were embedded into the final product. And so we are very appreciative of the opportunity to engage in a meaningful way. And we're really excited to continue the partnership. So wondering, when is C2C expected to launch and what needs to happen to get us to that point?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think our office officially launched with the legislation that passed last summer, and then, various milestones are happening after that. So the governing board, I report to a 21-person governing board, which includes data providers and includes appointed members of the public and communities. The board was seated in the fall, and then I started in February. And we have a couple of milestones coming ahead. So some of the tools are already live and online and available. So particularly, college and career planning tools for high school students that can be accessed at californiacolleges.edu. And this includes a free self-paced curriculum on applying for financial aid. So that's already live and available for families and for schools to tap into. And then the linked data system that we're building, we're going to create what we're calling an analytical data system, and analytical tools that go with that, like dashboards and a query builder that help people dig into the data. And we're currently kind of knee deep into the process of selecting technology solutions that will enable us to combine and display that information. So that's something that we're working on right now. And after we secure those tools, we'll be ready to get data from each of the state agencies who are partnering on this work. So we can bring that existing data together and match records for individuals and link the sources together, which will enable us to have this more comprehensive picture from cradle to career. Again, so it's about bringing together existing state data and meshing it together so that we can, start creating ways to share that information with students, with families, with researchers, with practitioners in a secure and accessible way. So that's some of the early things we're doing. In our board meeting in February, we talked about one of the first dashboards that we'll be building. So the plan is for the first dashboard to focus on the pipeline for training and retaining teachers. So as you know, California is facing a tremendous shortage of teachers, particularly during and as the pandemic continues. And we've seen a tremendous need for information that will enable the state to train more teachers and address issues that can contribute to the high turnover rates. So based on the input during the planning process that you all were involved in, the dashboard is going to try to look at the kinds of questions that were raised in that process. So understanding, what are the kinds of majors and training that teachers pursue before they enter a teacher training program, right? What kinds of credentials do they get after they graduate? What types of jobs do they secure in the schools? And, how long do they stay? Those kinds of questions. And even, if they leave the teaching profession, where are they going afterwards? And how does that compare to the jobs they had as a public school teacher? So it will really, the vision for this dashboard is to try to just provide useful information in a comprehensive way that helps people think about the teacher, training and retention pipeline start to finish. So those are some of the early things we'll be working on, and really looking forward to working with the communities as we build these out.
So much great information in that little snapshot. Number one, I want to say thank you for the clarification to my question when I said, well, when are we launching? Well, you've launched. That's huge, because I think people are just thinking about, okay, there's going to be this thing, there's going to be all this data and it's going to be online. When is that going to be up? But you're absolutely right. You are launched. Things are moving. And it's a very incremental, I believe is the language that you used. So I appreciate that very much. You did hit on a key point that I think a lot of folks were questioning. Where does the data come from? And you had mentioned this is existing statewide data that would be collected into the C2C. Did I get that right?
That's right. Yes. So, what data are we talking about and where will it come from? And as I, got to know this work and dug into everything that came out of the planning process, I was just really blown away by the ambition and the breadth of information that's going to be included in this analytical data set. So we're going to bring together existing data from K-12, right? So from the Department of Education, we'll be able to bring together data from the higher education segments, but there's also a vision for linking in data that can help us understand how students and young people access social services or workforce training programs, how that connects to jobs and the career part of Cradle to Career. So during the planning process, the groups identified more than 200 different data points that will be available over the next 5 years. And I'll just take a pause here and go back to something you mentioned a few minutes ago. Yes, we launched officially with the legislation, and I think you can think of our work as kind of coming in spurts, right? We're going to build this over time. There's been a very thoughtful 5-year plan that was mapped out in the planning process. And so we're starting with this teacher focused dashboard, and then over time we'll bring in additional kinds of data, including the social services data, including workforce data, that will enable us to have as full a picture as possible of the kind of cradle to career time in people's lives. So the vision is for the information that comes into Cradle to Career to be provided by state agencies, existing data. So the hope is to build something useful that doesn't create extra work for the teachers, for the educators, for social service providers. So it's taking data that are already collected, but that are currently, you know, kind of siloed, if you will, in different places, and bring them together for useful decision making. So that's kind of thinking about the analytical data system. I mentioned at the beginning the California Colleges.edu tools as well that provide support for applying to college and student financial aid information. Historically, information for that program had to be provided by local education agencies. And we're currently working, part of the vision that was mapped out in the planning process is for Cradle-to-Career to work across multiple state agencies to make the necessary linkages to streamline college and financial aid applications available so that it frees up more time for the schools and the colleges to focus on their students instead of the data submissions. So that's how we're thinking about where the data will come from and how we'll bring it together.
A whole lot. I'm glad that your big brain's on the job. That's awesome. You know, EDGE prioritizes career technical education, CTE, pathway programs, or learn opportunities. Can you talk a bit about what impact the C2C can have in these areas?
Yes, and I think, you know, when we talk about this work, I'm glad that the name that was chosen was Cradle-to-Career. Not the vision for this work is not narrowly just what happens in a K-12 education setting, right? Or even just higher education in particular. It's really about comprehensively that cradle-to-career pathway, including less linear paths, including you know, the various different opportunities that young people pursue. So I think there are a couple of ways that the cradle-to-career system can strengthen our understanding about the connections between school and training and work. So some of the planned data elements that I mentioned, in those 200 data points that are planned out, include information on the career and technical education courses that students take in high school, and what programs or majors they complete in college, or including community college, whether they participate in apprenticeship programs. So some of that information is already, you know, planned for that came out of the planning process. And then the additional piece about looking at the employment and earnings information by different kinds of training programs and post-secondary programs will be really helpful too. So to understand, you know, what's the pathway from studying certain majors or being a part of different training programs and how that relates to the jobs that people ultimately get. So, you know, we'll be working with the California Labor and Workforce Development Agency and its various partners and departments to integrate some of these data that goes even beyond apprenticeships. So we have that. There are also conversations about expanding some of the career exploration tools that California Colleges has to better address some of these CTE options at community colleges. So big picture, I think there are a lot of opportunities for how we think about workforce training comprehensively, and would really welcome, you know, your insight and your coalition's insight as we explore these kinds of questions.
Well, we stand ready to partner and to be helpful to you and your team in any way we can be. And we just feel very lucky to be in a position to, you know, provide input and information, and that your team is so receptive to that because it's brand new, right? It's brand new. So I feel that, you know, the more big brains that are at the table that can provide input, the bigger and better it's going to be for Californians. I also just wanted to point out in appreciation, I appreciate the language that you have used throughout this interview. You know, it's been very person-centered, which is so important to me. And also, although, you know, K through 12, of course, comes up, you know, adult learners, EDGE traditionally focuses on adult learners. We recently expanded our scope to include opportunity youth. And so often in education, the conversation starts and ends in K through 12, which of course is incredibly important, but it's not the only space for education and training. There's a lot of older people, you know, in this too. So I appreciate throughout our interview, you have uplifted both throughout.
Yeah. I appreciate that. And, you know, one of the stories I told as I was getting into this work is, you know, both my parents got their GEDs after I was born, right? And part of what shaped me and my childhood was seeing them navigate that whole path. And I think it's really important as we do this work to not think of I don't even want to use the word typical or linear path as though that's the default. There are many different paths that people take in this journey, from cradle to career. And the hope is to build a data system that really can shed light on and improve understanding of many different paths. So thank you for lifting that up.
Oh, I would love to hear, I'm sure our viewers would love to hear, how can communities and advocates provide input, get involved, stay involved as we continue to build this thing out?
Sure. So there are a couple of ways, some more formal and some more organic. So as I mentioned, I report to a 21-person board, and that board includes community members who are appointed as a part of the governing board. Additionally, in the legislation that created our work, you'll see 2 advisory boards mentioned, a data and tools advisory board and a community engagement advisory board. And we're actually supporting our governing board right now and preparing to seat those advisory boards. We're planning to do that in our May board meeting that's coming up. And those advisory boards will really provide a great avenue for input from communities to come up with ideas that we can then consider and evaluate, what's feasible, how can we, adapt our work to really be responsive to what we're learning from the advisory boards that will work closely with us as an office and with our governing board. So, like I said, we're seating these advisory boards soon, but they're doing staggered terms. So every year, a third of those board seats are going to turn over. So there will really be an opportunity in the coming years for people to join, and would love for, your network to be involved with that. Additionally, we have our formal meetings, which are public as a part of, California's public meetings. And even though we're now back to holding those in person in Sacramento, we're going to keep broadcasting them on Zoom as it was during the pandemic, so people can listen in and share public comment no matter where they are. And then we'll also have we're planning to start some monthly sessions where we just have a less formal conversation with our office and share with the public, here's what we're thinking about, here's what we're doing, and provide an opportunity for more organic feedback and engagement. So, I mentioned already, we have our analytical tools in the data system, we have the college and career planning tools, and the third main arm of our work is community engagement. So we're really planning to build a team so we have enough bandwidth to do that and engage a lot with different ambassadors to communities and with people directly in this work.
Oh my goodness, music to my ears. That's what meaningful engagement looks like, just access and opportunity for people to, show up from wherever they're at. There's a whole, there's a lot of conversation about public meetings, and a lot of people were able to participate when they were on Zoom, when we had to make those shifts due to the pandemic, and now we're going in person. In some cases, an online option is no longer available. So what do we do with that? Do we really shut people out again? So I'm really excited that you're going to make, make the opportunity to participate remotely available as well as in person, because of course, a lot can be said for in-person engagement. You just can't copy that on Zoom. It's just not the same thing. So that's wonderful to hear. And I think that the idea of having the outside of the, public meetings forums is such a great idea, because it just gives folks more time to dialogue and think and process. That's just wonderful to hear. Really excited. And, Edge, of course, will be happy to share the information that you and your office puts out so the community is aware of all these great opportunities that exist to engage with you. So this has been one.
Thank you.
Oh, happy to. I always like to end our interviews with a fun personal question, and we're at that point in the interview. So your fun personal question is, what are you reading, watching, or listening to these days? Any good books or shows or podcasts that we should be paying attention to?
Yeah, that's great. So my first answer is, my goodness, I work and I have 3 kids. I don't, but that's not entirely true. So, for example, I read old Calvin and Hobbes comics to my kids as bedtime story, because we care about quality literature in this household. In terms of other things I love listening to, so one favorite whenever I just need to relax is listening to The Moth. I love hearing people's stories, so I like listening to The Moth. I'm also currently trying to, listening to Spanish language learning podcasts to try to add that as a language that I can speak. And one book I recently got and I'm digging into is Better Data Visualizations.
Ooh.
So thinking about, the work that we're going to do with the dashboards and looking into that. So you can take your pick from Calvin and Hobbes to technical books on how to create better data visualizations.
I love that though, the intersectionality. I mean, you for real, like you had your own personal, you had your kids and your job in there. You know, women do it all.
That's what we've learned during the pandemic. You know, our personal lives are a little bit more visible when we're, you know, working from home over the last few years, and I think it's a good thing.
I agree 100%. I really, really do. Thank you for sharing that. You know, it was absolutely wonderful to spend some time with you today. Thank you so much for joining me today, Marianne.
Thanks so much, Seema. It's great to be here.
And I'll see you next time on The Cutting Edge.